The man stopped speaking and gazed off for a moment in silence. Sand fell, but it was night, so the sand was quickly gone. Death said, "Envy and gratitude." "Envy and gratitude," the man replied. "You know what immediately came into my thought? That expression, living the dream." The man sat for a while thinking. It was late. He was tired. People respond to that. They notice when someone seems to be nailing it. People love a winner. They will follow a winner, hoping for the crumbs perhaps, or the chance to live vicariously. Some may simply enjoy seeing someone doing something cool, but all the while the damage, the corrosion is getting in there. Who can be gratified when they come upon something that makes their world seem banal? How can someone avoid that second edge to the blade? How can children? And what of gratitude? Is the term not meaningless? Is it not so relative a term as to be meaningless? The Wraith cut in. "I am not satisfied with your points. You are going to have to do better." "I know. I apologize. It is late. All of these terms are relative. The pairs are pairs for a reason. And yes, I am pleased my life has been such that my place is to tend a temple to water, even if that is a self-appointed role, even if it produces just a trickle of visitors who chance upon it. It is gratifying to see that there are those who choose a simple cup, even if they weren't seeking it. But then what is a pilgrim other than someone who has undertaken a path and who sees what there is to see when they come upon it? That's off track, but perhaps relevant. But what is gratitude without envy? To be happy with a situation is to envy it over others. There must be something to compare it to. Those who are gratified to have found God do not envy those who haven't. And should we not envy those who have more? Clearly the question is, more of what? So as usual, the vice and the strength are dependent on what it is to which they attach. To be envious of the achievement of something good is fine, so long as it acts as a spur to also achieve. People place all sorts of things into that good category that don't belong. And not only that, they perceive things to be good even when the so-called good is only a veneer. They experience the emotive response without having applied sufficient care to appreciate that the veneer is not the reality. And then you have to think, why should envy take on the negative shade it has? Why must the desire to have the desirable be frowned upon? Well, what is its counterpoint? Gratitude, the epitome of stasis. The entire construct exists to protect established power. I'm not saying that it is all bad. Society requires stability, but it also requires that it not crystallize into something that degrades over time due to a loss of flexibility, a loss of agility. There needs to be a steady refreshment of the community to make sure that it doesn't become fearful and stultified. So yeah, telling people who are in the shit that they should be grateful for their situation should be considered insulting. Then again, people do need to know their place. "Insulting?" Death hissed. "I am grateful for a lot, but there is a lot I'm not grateful for. Life is at the top of the list. I would rather not be separated from the totality of the universe. Practically speaking, everything about life seems like a sick joke to me. All of the pain and suffering, and everyone just grinning and bearing it, or at best grinning in ignorance, whether willful or absolute. So no, envy and gratitude, in the end, we should be grateful for nothing other than nothing itself, and we should be envious of all that is better, provided it spurs us to achieve it. But that's not how it plays out in life. In most people's lives, envy operates like a corrosive, and people's lives these days are saturated with envy, and their souls are corroding. Envy in the extreme has always corroded souls, hence gratitude. But the opportunity to be grateful for the vast majority of people has disappeared. For a while it is possible now to see just how much worse other places are or seem to be. It is also possible to see just how much better other places are or seem to be. So for a person who does in fact hold a degree of empathy in their emotive experience, they either have to be grateful at the expense of others or grateful despite the fortune of others. That's why I've said I consider society to be psychopathic, because you have to ignore empathy for others in order to be grateful for anything. And if you are not sufficiently careful in considering what seems to be better, then you just end up feeling like shit. And you know what? Practically none of what seems better is actually better. That's why I brought up that thing people say, living the dream. People have said it to me, and if I could, I would say, don't fucking envy me, I spend my time speaking to the Wraith. There are no laughing children where I live, only solemnity, only sorrow. I'm waiting to die, I work so that I may die. The man stopped talking and watched the sand fall over the rocks to be picked up by the breeze and carried to the sea. Of course, once again, expectation is tied in. Gratitude, be happy with what you have. Envy, be happy with what you have. They are both conservative in that way. Who wishes to conserve? It depends. But it is always whoever is doing well at the time, and always whoever fears. And who is not happy to conserve? Those who are not doing well at the time. How are they quelled? By being told that to envy is to sin. By being told to look at what they already have, even if simply the love of a deity they have never in fact seen or known, and to be grateful for that, because just think how much worse it could be. And here is a warm tunic that you can take with you back to the streets, and you may be knifed for it tonight, but you should be happy while you have it, and remember that we gave it to you because we are so generous. So cynical. It is only partly cynical. I'm not necessarily making the argument that the conservative position isn't correct. It may be. The reasoning of it is obvious. That is why I'm considering what I'm considering, because we all know the obvious. The question is, what else is it? We all have the reasons we tell ourselves, and some of us are aware to some extent of what underlies those reasons. And I'm not ready to accept as reasonable the idea that power, that hierarchical structures are not relevant to human beings. I believe they are clearly relevant. I just think they should be more carefully considered. I believe in philosopher kings. I believe in that form. That is to say that I think that is what would be best. But that is certainly not what we have. But really, as much space as I might give that position, the conservative position is not correct when the status quo is not correct. And if you've got people living with mental illness all over the streets of your cities, well, that pretty clearly means the status quo is not correct. And if the people are living all over the streets as a result of naive liberal policies, then those who espouse the liberal philosophies cannot be trusted to solve it either. So who does? Who is left to speak of envy and gratitude? Well, who? The terms should cease to exist. They're both stupid. If the society was correct, they simply wouldn't exist. The Wraith challenged. So they play a role in the incorrect society, which accounts for every society. I'm not saying they don't refer to something that exists, nor that they are not useful in that way. I understand the corrosive element. I understand the wisdom for the mental health of the individual, of a community, in not fixating on absence. I understand that the concept of gratitude is from the same root as the concept of ceasing expectation as a means of achieving harmony. To have expectation, to hold desires and aversions, to wish for a given scenario is the root of misery. I understand it. The mechanism of the concept is clear and simple. Too simple. Where would such a mindset come from? It comes from an imperfect situation. It comes from a situation of imbalance. It is a mechanism that is designed to numb the recipient of injustice. And it doesn't matter whether that injustice is perpetrated by God, by nature, or by man. It is sick, really, to its core. But the truth is that God and nature being the manifestation of forms, let's say, are ruthless. The best humans have sought to live in a way that is less cruel, but the cruelty is always on the doorstep. It is the cruelty of nature and of God that are behind the fact that well-intentioned sympathetic policies so often end in disaster. The only fit place for the conservative is in an old-growth virgin forest. But it's the liberals who generally more overtly wish to save nature from spoliation. What does that mean? Does it mean that conservatives do not wish to conserve the pristine state of nature? That conservatism is attached to another manifestation, another phase of existence, another expression? Conservatism tends more to refer to culture, to human concerns, to power concerns, and part of that is traditionalism. Traditionalism is not all equal. Some is deep, some is superficial. It connotes a temporal aspect at its core. How deep does that tradition run? Is it to conserve the traditions of the last wave of power, the power of the warlord, the landowner, the merchant, the service provider? The old always eventually give way to the upstart new, but the old will always cling. They didn't get what they got by not fighting. They didn't retain it by not clinging. The situation requires they be again their ancestor, who himself was once an upstart, but they can't, because to be an upstart you have to be coming from a different place. But is there not a difference between the passing of a torch and the taking of a torch? I mean, evolution might take longer with the passing of the torch, but perhaps that time might be useful. Perhaps that time might allow a greater depth of consideration be afforded the process of considering objectives and what it means to achieve them. And when the torch is taken, well, what remains of tradition? The traditions of the old die with the old, and all that is bound up within them also dies. And so, what traditions of relevance are there anymore anyway? Many are so ingrained we don't even see them. But even those may be short of life, because how long does it take for a tradition to be ingrained? Traditions may be formed within a single generation, and for the children of that generation, those traditions have always existed. They have been there forever. So, the traditional element of the conservative might in fact be very thin indeed, and yet traditions are mooring lines. Whether good or bad, they provide consistency, and the human mind requires consistency for its health. It requires more than that for its objective health, but only for its objective health. Subjective health, and I mean by that integrity of function regardless of what that function may be, can exist in practically any circumstance. And that gets to the heart of the issue. The issue is the adaptability of the human. Other creatures are also incredibly adaptable, but none are so adaptable as a human. The human can exist and survive in any circumstances that don't actually kill it, especially if it's never known a different circumstance. But that is the same as any other animal. What is different is that the human mind has the capacity to define and control its environment in ways that no other creature can. Humans represent the traits of all of what is in nature. We are the expressions of combined forms. We are the vessels for forms. We act for forms. We play out the influence of gods. What does this have to do with envy and gratitude? Interrupting again. No patience, no faith. I've seen it before. You have watched it. People must have it written. The man's face betrayed a memory he didn't like. Probably something, if you think about it, he said. The Wraith watched him. He seemed displeased. The man mustered himself and spoke. Consideration, breeding, nurturing, the passing of the torch to the wise, that is what makes sense to me. In a corrupt society, in a corrupt species, the notion that envy is a sin is cruel and unrealistic. If some people have shit that other people don't have, envy is to be expected. The people who have it wouldn't have it if it wasn't the sort of thing people might want, usually anyway. And for people to have gratitude, and I mean in the extreme, in the sense that it shouldn't be possible to have too much of a virtue, requires that they must be stupid or psychopathic. Strong words. Intentionally, to make the point. We take for granted that gratitude is this wonderful thing, and on its face it is, but beneath its surface there is more. That's what I've been talking about. If you want compliant people, then let them feel gratitude. And once they feel gratitude, the psychopathic among them will join your ranks to help you to take advantage of the stupid. The psychopathic will be grateful for their paycheck and their lifestyle. They won't care about the externalized costs of it, not for others presently, nor for others in the future. It means nothing to them. They may pretend to care, may make gestures of care, but they wouldn't let it get in the way of what provides them what they are grateful for. Indeed, they will jealously protect what they are grateful for. And they will also covet more, having envy of their own, and some of them will themselves become the next generation of exploiters. As regards the stupid, well, with them you just have to feed them products and services to keep them entertained and they will be grateful. And if they ever rock the boat, all you have to do is demonstrate how precarious their position is by introducing some new threat, for example, and they will fall into line again. The only risk is that if you lose control of the reins for even a moment, resulting in a situation wherein they must go without their drip feed, well, fuck, you've got approximately 72 hours to get shit back on track. You'll have looting and chaos. That's how precarious it is. Unless it's in the context of war, everyone can get on board with that. They will give up all sorts of stuff for war. Doesn't matter if it's a bullshit war, a war against drugs, a war against a virus, an economic war, whatever. People love war. It's about the only thing that everybody can get on board with. Well, war and consumption. Which means, of course, that any threat to consumption is a great way to get a war going. And what's the best way to get people to forget or continue to overlook that they should be consuming less anyway? Well, start a war and see if it helps. Just keep that drip dripping, whatever the cost. Keep that drip dripping. The Wraith spoke. Gluttony and temperance, it said.